Good evening, everyone. My name is Tan Hui. I'm the Indochina Bureau Chief of the Straits Times and board member of the FCCT. Welcome, and to our viewers who are watching our live stream, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to be talking about the high-speed railway line that's going to be launched tomorrow in Laos. But before that, please let me share some of the events that we've got lined up at the FCCT in the weeks ahead. Next Tuesday, on the 7th of December, we will be screening some film excerpts and having a panel discussion about the Cold War and propaganda on film. That's really interesting now that we seem to be entering another Cold War. On Thursday, 9th of December, we will be having another film screening, this time about the Myanmar protests after the coup, and that will be followed by another panel discussion. On the 17th of December, that's a Friday, we've got our annual Christmas dinner, and from what I've heard, we've got the special piñata waiting for you there. Now, back to our program for tonight. We have to apologize in advance. It was meant to be a hybrid event, but as you can see, it's less hybrid than it turned out to be because of our last-minute quarantine restrictions. We live in the Omicron times. But anyway, it's going to be a momentous event for Laos tomorrow. They're going to launch its high-speed railway that took 5 years to build. And here are some basic facts about this Laos-China railway project. And by that, I'm only referring to the Laos portion because there's this whole section in Yunnan province that forms a part of that too. So this is a $6 billion project that crosses over 400 kilometers. Starts at the Laos-China border and then travels all the way down to Vientiane and ending very close to the Laos-Thailand border. Construction was challenging because the railway line cuts through mountains and almost half the route is made up of tunnels. This project was funded largely through loans from China, and it will be operated by a joint venture in which Chinese firms will have majority control. Now, this topic can be quite polarizing. Some people are convinced that this railway is a death threat for Laos, and that China or Thailand will benefit more than Laos. But just last week, I was speaking to someone in Laos who really insisted that Laos needed this railway and that China was the only country that could have built this. So tonight we have assembled a distinguished panel of experts to present a range of perspectives on this issue. On the screen, the top right-hand corner of your screen is Mr. Suknilan Kiaula, a researcher at the Institute of Developing Economies, Japan External Trade Organization, who is joining us from Tokyo. At the bottom left corner of your screen, you have Dr. Pon Suwarnasinghe, Assistant Professor of Comparative and International Policy at Bentley University, the US. At the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you have Ms. Panita Sayarod, Chiang Mai University lecturer and now a PhD candidate at Cologne University. She's joining us from Germany. And then the top middle portion of your screen, you have Dr. Saranyu Viriyavejakun, Vice President of Thailand's neighboring countries' Economic Development Cooperation Agency. And finally, next to me here, we have Professor Yang Baoyun, Emeritus Professor at Beijing University and Visiting Professor at Thammasat University. Thank you very much for joining us here today, and good morning, good evening to every one of you. We will start by having each of them give us a brief take on this issue, and then we're going to take some questions from the floor. And if you're watching this online and would like to pose questions, please put them in the comments section of our Facebook video, and we will be sure to pick it up. Now, to start off, let's turn to Mr. Giola. As a Laotian and an economist who's been following this development quite closely, what do you think this railway means for Laos?
Okay, so good evening. So I start my 5-minute
Yes.
Session. Okay. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Tan Hui Yi, the Indo-China Bureau Chief of Straits Times, for having me in tonight's event. Okay. I cannot claim to represent Laos. I have to make that clear, at the outset. But since I'm Lao national, maybe my perspective would be quite similar to people in Laos. First, I would like to talk about this project by putting it into the historical perspective of Laos. For the landlocked Laos, Thailand has historically been the only feasible trade route with the world. The attempt to secure another route dates back at least till the time of French rule. France tried to develop trade routes to the south via Cambodia or to the east via Vietnam, but it did not succeed. Later on, the former Soviet Union repeated the attempt to establish eastern route, but did not succeed either. This does not mean that there are no roads to Cambodia or Vietnam, but trading in those directions just got so much higher not only in money term, but also in terms of time, then doing so through Thailand. This may, be a surprise for many of you, but even now, Laos export to Japan, for example, to the northeast, or to China, just across the border to the north, are still mostly routed through Lam Chabang seaport in Thailand to the southwest. So cargo needs to go in the opposite direction to where they are supposed to go. So the Lao-Chinese Railway, I think, in this sense, is a breakthrough in this long-term attempt to secure additional trade route. Of course, the trade route via Thailand would remain the most important for Laos, in foreseeable future, given the historical or cultural time and the location of Laos' major cities along the border of Thailand. But the implication of another feasible trade route is huge, I think, for Laos. China itself is now #2 economy in the world with huge and growing market. Feasible trade route to China may also mean feasible trade route to rich Western markets on land. Unfortunately, the cost of achieving this is extremely high for Laos, given its economic size. But I believe this should be expected. If it isn't, someone else, the French, the Russian could have done the same in the past. However, the ongoing debt problem in Laos is real and serious. The pressure of debt related to this project on the government budget would continue for many years to come. And since it is unrealistic to expect the income, the revenue from passengers or cargo to pay for this project, I think it is critically important for Lao government to try to develop industrial tourism along the route so that it can have indirect revenue from this project. So while this is a breakthrough, I think it is just a beginning of the new chapter of Laos' external economic relations. Whether it turns out to be a successful one depends on how hard Laos continues to work to find more and more ways to profit from this very costly project. I think I have done that in my 5-minute time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kiola. We will turn to Dr. Pon next. Dr. Pon, you have been doing quite a fair bit of research into the financing of infrastructure projects into this region. Can you tell us a bit more about what you think this railway means for the region as well as for Laos?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I broadly can, echo and concur with Mr. Giola. I think one thing I would add, and that I kind of want to start off with in terms of my remarks today, is that I think, Hui, you said that somebody said, this railway couldn't have otherwise been built if not now. When? And I want to draw attention to I wrote a whole dissertation, and my work thus far has looked at the ways in which what we used to know as the post-World War II Bretton Woods aid system with concessional lending for infrastructure has pretty much disappeared, or it may be making a new sort of return with the EU and the US in the near future. But for the last at least 25 years or so, there haven't been grants and concessional loans for these types of very costly projects. And historically, other countries that are advanced industrial countries now, like Japan, Germany, the United States, France, the UK, they figured out either domestic state banks, policy banks, or been able to mobilize commercial capital. So Laos is has been in a very kind of difficult position in an international context that has changed significantly. And perhaps a couple of visuals would be helpful in this regard. I'll sort of start with the kind of near history of this. I started research in Laos a little bit over a decade ago, and it wasn't clear even a decade ago that this project would get to the point that it is now. In 2011, the Chinese railway minister, was embroiled in a huge scandal after, one of the largest high-speed railway collisions in the world in Wenju. He subsequently, of course, was sentenced to death. He was found to have 16 cars, 18 mistresses, 350 apartments. But it sparked off, the important thing is it sparked off a reckoning inside China and a review of all the projects. And it found that the Lao Railway project, even back then, was commercially questionable in terms of its viability. There were domestic debates in Laos itself, which led to, of course, the stepping down of high-profile ministers in the Lao Politburo, also related to this project. So it seemed for a number of years, just before the sort of rise of the Belt and Road Initiative and the deepening of relations, that this might not, it could have perhaps stalled or not happened. And so, I think of where we are now in terms of the micro ecological and macro impacts of the project. I would say that there has been historical precedent in terms of small countries that have had to bear the economic cost of railways. And I started out my research life in Bosnia looking at the effects of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the ways in which it transferred administrative costs for railway building onto Bosnia. And the same could be said about the British in Mozambique. And I worry that the financial risk in Laos, as Mr. Kiela said, are pretty significant. It excludes sort of, the future is not foreclosed, but we have to be really careful about what kind of agricultural protections are in place for Lao farmers. What does that look like in terms of perhaps revisiting ASEAN trade agreements and issues of course, accessibility. I have an upcoming paper next month that's coming out that looks at, for example, the role of hydropower projects within debt exposure. But on the right-hand side is just a clip of all of the sort of hydro projects between 71 and now. And the color in orange are all the projects that are Chinese Policy Bank financed. So by the Development Bank and Exim Bank. On the left, Aid Data project at William and Mary College has a huge database of Chinese infrastructure loans or large loans. And what's significant about the left, I did some calculations based on the Aid Data data set. Of the top 50 largest Chinese project loans, you can see that amongst the countries on the left-hand column, we're looking at really large, medium, middle-income former powers, right? Brazil, Venezuela, Russia, Pakistan, vis-a-vis Laos. I mean, Laos, relative to the rest of the countries on that list in terms of taking on such an enormous project size, there's a significant exposure. So much so that, scholars are saying that Laos is in a literal league of its own in terms of its exposure to both sovereign debt and what we call hidden debt. Hidden debt is the kind of debt that is the implicit sort of guarantees that the government may be exposed to in terms of joint ventures, state holding companies, state banks, state enterprises. If you can see on the right-hand corner here, nearly 3/4 of Laos' GDP is tied into hydro and rail projects relative to its economy. So there's a relative trade-off there in terms of whether or not these investments in infrastructure-led growth will translate into industrial upgrading, agricultural trade, and other forms of economic reconfiguration. I'll sort of leave it there. I think my time is up. But if anybody wants to contact me or ask further questions, you can, of course, reach me online.
Great, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have more to discuss about Laos' financial condition. But before that, let's turn to Ms. Panitda next. Ms. Panitda, you're the only anthropologist on this panel. So I'm really going to ask you, what do you think this really means for people on the ground?
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me as well. May I just start by telling about my story? So let me just share my screen first. So just hang on. I hope you see it clearly. Okay. May I start my part by telling you about my impression about the BRI? I am an anthropologist. We love telling stories, so please bear with me a little bit. I remember that since the end of 2014, news media in Thailand were premiered with the declaration of China and Thailand Railway Corporation. And then in 2017, the inauguration ceremony of the Thai first high-speed railway was finally held in Pak Chong, Korat. The beautiful speech delivered from the Chinese and Thai leaders emphasized that the keywords such as win-win cooperation, mutual benefit, particularly from the Chinese side, stress the key message that Chinese and Thai are like one family. A friendly neighbor, the cooperation brings more benefit to both people, while the Thai leader envisioned the lucrative future for Thailand to be a logistics center of ASEAN. So obviously, we can see that at the policy level, the railway project was portrayed to the public as an important international route that, and to be part of the BRI will bring prosperity to Thailand and the region. In Thailand, the railway network has been stagnant since 1951. Similar to many countries in Global South, this kind of modern transportation projects give a sense of a desirable future, signify hope and aspiration of better connectivity. In the book named The Promise of Infrastructure, many authors demonstrate that the infrastructure is a future-oriented plan that often promises the improvement of living conditions to the society. The ambition maps of the railway network tell us about the anticipation and vision of the modern bright future that the political elite imagine for the entire country. Although a huge amount of sovereign debt will occur, but the legitimacy of the project was sold by the promise of the modernity that the high-speed railway offered. So as an anthropologist, I tend to look at the BRI from the resilient community perspective. I'm more interested in how local people thinking about it and how they feel about it, or how they deal with the effect that we saw from it. So in 2017, I conduct a small research in Nong Khai province just to find out how the land use allowed the station, and just ask a simple question to people who are living around the station. What do you think about the railway? Located at the border between Thai and Laos, Nong Khai has become one of the most attractive economic provinces. Nong Khai residents have been encountered a number of mega projects for decades. Therefore, real estate and land speculation have been booming for many years. One of the owners of the shops told me that now the land price here has become an untouchable price for local people. However, for the issue of the acquisition of land and the resettlement, it seemed to be more moderate in some group of people. For example, a resident told me that she is now negotiating the price of her house with a Taiwanese businessman who just came to start a real estate project in the community. If he offered a higher price, she might sell it and move to the outskirts of the town where the land is cheaper. So we learned that the economic and social capital play an important role to determine resettlement capacity. It seemed that the concerning points were mainly about the insufficiency of project details, uncertainty of resettlement date, inequity of access to the information, and insufficient compensation. Another thing that's interesting for me is the answer of how do they see the high-speed railway in the future. Many local residents answer me by bringing up the past story, in which contained the suffering and disappointment in the previous development project in Nong Khai. The past indignant account were told when asking about the expectation of the future railway project. The current resettlement issue and the delay of the railway construction were intertwined with the past experience when the government had failed to deliver on its promise of the local economic boom in 1994, the year when the first Thai-Lao cross-border bridge was built in Nong Khai. So for the Sino-Thai Railway project that now has not come to pass yet in Thailand, the long-awaited conclusion of the financial contract, the unclear construction schedule have discredited the central Thai government and decreased trustworthiness in local government agencies. In contrast with the exciting plan proposed by the state, a sense of loss and hopelessness are the key themes describing of the local resident experience and feel about the delayed Sino-Thai Railway in Nong Khai. Thank you. I end here. I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Panita. I guess we will be returning to the topic of what's happening in Nong Khai when we have Dr. Sarawanyu present. But for now, let's turn to Professor Yang. Professor Yang, China has been a huge source of funds for this project, and it will have a big say in how this railway will be run in Laos. Could you share a bit about how important this project is for China?
Okay, good evening, dear sir and madam, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to exchange my idea about the China-Laos Railway today. I must say, today is a very special day because today is the National Day of Laos. Today is also the ceremony for the first store there 5 years ago. We find that with 5 years, a railway with more than 1,000 kilometers from Kunming to Wanxiang, more than 400 kilometers from the Mohan to Wanxiang constructed. And tomorrow, we will have a meeting via video link between Xi Jinping, Chinese president, and Len Peng, president of Laos, for the ceremony of the official opening of this railway. And I think this is a very important event. For me, personally, okay, maybe. For me, personally, I have a special feeling about this railway. Why? Because my first travel in Laos is 1994. And I remember that there even not the flight direct from Beijing to Vientiane. I think via Kunming, Bangkok, and Vientiane. And around 20 years ago, during the Spring Festival, it means that the Chinese New Year, and I have traveled by the jeep with my friends from the Xishuangbanna to Vientiane. We met more than 1 week for this travel. And it's very difficult here. Even it's difficult to find the guides for my jeep. And I discussed with my friend, if in the future there are railway, even a route of the good quality, we will come here to visit the Laos. And I can say that from around 20 years ago, I have a dream. Hope that there are railway. It can what can link China and Laos. And 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, at I think November 2019, and I go to Laos just to visit the situation of the construction of the railway, etc. Why? Because I'm working on the Southeast Asia studies more than 40 years, especially on the Indo-Chinese study, because I have French language formation. I have my PhD in Paris University, etc. This time, today, we come here, we discuss together about the China-Laos Railway. I think it's a very important event. I think that for this railway, it has a very important signification for many things. Firstly, for two countries, for China and Laos. You know, they are the very close relationship between China and Laos in the different fields, like the political, economic, cultural, etc. And with these links, I think it can improve the development in future to strengthen, improve the relationship between two countries. And for the Indo-Chinese Peninsula, we can find that the China-Laos Railway is a part of the net of the railway in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. We can say that also this is a part of the project of the Belt and Road initiative. And if in the future there are connection between the China-Laos Railway with the China-Thailand Thai Railway, in reality, the China-Thailand Thai Railway must be a prolongation of the China-Laos Railway. It must be connected at the Lang Khai. In this basis, we can still have a perspective in the future if we have a railway from Bangkok to Singapore, from Bangkok to Phnom Penh, Ho Chi Minh Ville. There are also the railway from China or from Thailand to Myanmar, etc. And in this case, we can have a complete net of the railway. And in this case, I think we have much more the opportunity to the development of all the countries of this region in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. Third, in this basis, we can also improve the relationship between China and ASEAN, because China and ASEAN have also a very close relationship. Just maybe 1 week ago, there the big meeting between a summit between the leader of China and ASEAN member country. And just for the ceremony of the 30 years of the relationship between China and ASEAN. We know now we have the cooperation between China and ASEAN in the background of the Belt and Road. And on the basis of this railway, I want to say the China and Laos, we can have much more the possibility to improve the relation in the future between China and ASEAN. Today, I think I haven't many time to explain it. Maybe after the other question and answer, I can continue, or I have still some minutes.
Do you have a lot more?
No, a lot more. Just maybe 5 minutes more. Okay. And for me, maybe this is also your question. What's the benefits for Laos, or for also for China with this railway? Because I have been in Laos a little, I think around 8 or 10 times. And I remarked the development of the economy of this country, especially with the cooperation, economic cooperation between China and Laos. What's this cooperation brought the benefit to Laos? I think with this railway, there are much more facility to improve the economic cooperation between China and Laos, and there are more the facility, for example, to transport the products of Laos to China, also from China to Laos. Because with this railway, we can find that the cost and the time will be much reduced. For example, when I drive the jeep from the Shirambana to Vientiane, it's a difficulty, and especially the road quality of the road is not so. But by the train, there are much more the facility. And with this train, construction of this railway, it give also many opportunity to the village, city, etc. around the railway, even for the province around near the railway area. For China, I think is also very important because with this railway, we can, just as I said, we can continue to improve the development of the relation with other countries of the Southeast Asia, especially in the Chinese peninsula. And in the future, I think with the construction, opening of this China-Laos railway, maybe it improve also other countries to think if we must accelerate the construction of a railway to connect this railway. For example, yesterday, Bangkok Post have a paper about the opinion of the Minister of the Transport of Thailand. And the Minister calls, we must accelerate the construction of the railway to connect it with Laos railway. Why? Because if we do it as soon as possible, maybe we lost many of the opportunity for the economic development, especially with the development of the economy post-pandemic. I think maybe I too long. And I stop here. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask a question. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Young. I guess now is an appropriate time to talk about what's happening in Thailand. Dr. Saran, you have a very important job of looking at Thailand's links with its neighboring countries. Can you tell us a bit more about what this Laos-China railway means for Thailand?
Okay. Well, I'd like to say good evening to most participants. Good morning to one panelist in the US, and good afternoon to another panelist in Germany. First, I thank FCCT, especially Tan Huy Yi, for having me here. Let me please start off by sharing NEDA experience while keeping that question in mind for questions and answer session a little bit later. This would link back to our topic. You know, NEDA, Neighboring Countries Economic Development Cooperation Agency, is a public organization in Thailand. We are responsible for Thailand's ODA, to 7 countries, including Laos, of course. We also take care of our CLMV. Now, again, like other panelists, I am not representing NEDA, but I provide my personal opinion, and perhaps I could answer some other questions later on. NEDA would provide concessional loans, a low interest rate in the vicinity of 1.5 plus or minus % per year, with some grace period where you only pay interest rate up to 10 or so years. Please share the screen. Go on next, please. Now we provide provide cooperation projects in many fields, but most prominent field by far is connectivity, basically infrastructure like roadways, and railways, of course. And we have our basically closest friends who share most common culture, even language. Right next to the east of Thailand, Laos, Lao PDR is our very good friends, and it shared about 80% of our portfolio. It's over 10 billion baht projects cost up to now, after 16 years of NEDA existence. Now, let me go on to the next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah, for each country, we don't have the same projects, of course. We would have to consider a few factors to include 1 to 4. I think you could have these slides a little bit later, but it's just the facts. You could also have this basic information on our website. Next, please. Now, in association with this topic, the Laos-China Railway project, we have some other projects, like the first one on the right, that would be the Hong Sa Ban-Ching-Man Road Construction Project, completed 2 years ago. An ongoing design project is to connect Ban Ching Man and Luang Prabang Mekong Bridge project. That's on design phase. Now let me please share to you the next slide to talk about the Thai-Lao railway construction projects. Now again, the Thai-Laos. Under NEDA responsibility, we have 2 phases. Phase 1 completed long time ago was the Nong Khai Thanalang, only 3.5 kilometers away, and also the loan was only about 2 million baht, Thai baht. Again, it's meter gauge, which would be different from the standard gauge. You know this. Now, that was completed a long time ago in 2008. That was phase 1. Phase 2, please, next slide. Phase 2 is ongoing. There are 2 sections. The first section was to construct container yards, already completed. Phase 2, ongoing, the progress is 90% already, is to construct the Vientiane main station and also another 7.5 kilometers of railway. Again, it's meter gauge. This is the same as last phase, grant 30% and loan 70%. Next slide, please. Next, okay. In association the Thai-Lao railway construction projects and Laos-China railway projects, I think there are some missing link. So perhaps in the future that would become our our loan projects to do this, because we are focusing on basically connectivity and to fill up some missing links along the economic corridors in the region. I think I would stop right now, and perhaps we'll open for the questions and answer session a little bit later. Please reach out to me in case of any other questions at NEDA, of course, through FCCT. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Saranyu. We're moving on to the Q&A section now. If you have any questions, please go to the mic at the center of the floor there. And if you're watching this online and you would like to post a question, please put it in the comment section of our Facebook video. But let me kick it off by asking my question about the financial condition of Laos. On Tuesday in the Vientiane Times, and that's a state-run newspaper, there was this rather alarming article that basically said that the government was in need of massive financial support, and that's actually the headline. And it went on to say that its fiscal deficit was going to grow to 2.53% of GDP, and it needed 14 trillion kip to repay the loan principals this year. So that's about $1.3 billion. And bear in mind that that's just the loan principals, and it's not the interest payments on its debt. I found it pretty alarming that you had this kind of article in the state-run newspaper. So I'm going to stick my neck out and ask this question now. And how close is Laos to financial collapse? And do you think there is any way out of that? Would anyone like to tackle that question? Yes, please, Dr. Pong.
I think the word collapse, I'll just preface it by saying that the BRI Chinese loans that Laos currently has, that again, as I mentioned in my presentation in terms of its debt exposure, they contractually are outside of the Paris Agreement process. So what that means is normally if you have a default with the IMF or the World Bank and other creditors, they come in and there's there's a protocol, a procedure for which this creditor gets paid first and the next one. And there's also grace periods and ways in which you can structure your repayments. We don't really know what that's going to look like in terms of bilateral relations, but we do know in terms of the contractual arrangements that there are collateralized components to it. And so I think it's going to be, it's not a straightforward procedure, it's a political negotiation. So I think collapse is relative to what political leaders are then able to negotiate with Beijing. But let's remember that these are commercial, these are loans, they're not grants, they're not concessions. It's very serious. It's statistically really the most extreme debt exposure of any of the BRI recipients in the world.
Thank you. What about you, Mr. Kiola?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is an open secret that Laos is having a serious fiscal problem. Actually, the current prime minister, right after he took the office, I think in his very first speech to the National Assembly, he asked the Assembly to declare two things, the national agenda. One is this fiscal problem. The other is drug-related problems. So the government, does not try to hide it anyway. It is very open about it. And if you listen to the speech by the prime minister, he would say something like, if you don't do this, the crisis would actually happen. And he even set, a very strict time frame to himself, until 2023. he wanted to make sure that he would see a way out of this. He didn't say that he would like to solve the problem completely, but he just said that he wanted to make sure by 2023 that he has found a way out. That is one thing, and another thing to consider is that I think we know that the government has, I don't know if this is official or unofficial, but I think they use mineral resources as collateral, for this loan. So in the worst case, I think, it is still possible to pay with that. The question is, whether China would like to go with that, because then it could damage the reputation of the BRI itself. So my comment would be that yes, the problem is very serious, but it doesn't mean that that there's going to be a fiscal or economic crisis tomorrow. There seems to be, many options that the government can take, even those, related to asking help from, other donors, Western donors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would any other panelists would like to tackle that question? No, that's a tough one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to. Are there more people who want to ask questions from the floor? If not, I will go on to my next one. Now let's flip this discussion around a bit and look at some of the opportunities offered by this railway, which I think Professor Young, you touched upon, and I think also Mr. Kiola. But let's look at what is the potential payoff for Laos here, right? And is Laos in a position to exploit those opportunities offered by this railway? There have been comments made that why does Laos need a high-speed railway, although some would argue that's medium speed. And also this railway ultimately will benefit China and Thailand more than Laos. What are your thoughts on that?
So that is to me, Dan.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. As you said, I did a simulation analysis using, computer, using, model, geographic model with my colleagues. And the result is that it says that, there would be two types of trains in this high-speed railway. One is passenger train, the other is cargo train. And my simulation, the simulation results is that Laos would gain the most from a passenger train. But Thailand and China would gain much more from cargo train. And I think that fits very well with my, my observation or experience on the ground. When we look at, the logistics infrastructure that have been built so far, if you go to Laos, the trucks that carrying, goods, usually, most of them would be those carrying goods, from Thailand to China, or from China to Thailand, or Thailand to Vietnam, Vietnam to Thailand. It's a transit trade. Why? Because Laos, because industry in Laos is still in a quite undeveloped stage. If you don't produce, you cannot profit from cargo train. You have to produce first. So it will still take time for Laos to be able to do that. But on the other hand, given the structure of Lao economy now, if there are more people coming to Laos with this high-speed train, it does have the capacity to benefit from that. So, as you said, my expectation is that in the short run, Laos would benefit more from passenger train. Whether it can benefit from cargo train, that depends on how can it develop its own industry. Otherwise, you would just let the Thai or the Chinese carry goods, through Laos.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to tackle that question? Maybe Professor Yang?
Okay, on this question, I think that according to my observation, firstly, with the development of the cooperation between China and Laos, I remark that there are the improvement of development in this country. With the construction of this railway, I think it will give much more opportunity to development of Laos in different fields. For example, with the construction of this railway, a team of the construction worker, manager of the railway is formed. And in this case, we can find in the future, now is a joint venture. In the future, this railway will be totally managed by the Lao technicians and the engineers. Now we preparate form the talents, all the technician, engineer for Laos with construction of the railway. Certainly, with the facility given by this railway, there are more the facility for the transportation, for the development of the commerce, trade, etc. And surely there are new rising of the development economy in Laos. And third, with the development of the economy, sure, there are alleviation of the poverty in this country. We know in the country, in the Chinese Peninsula, there are some countries still relatively poor. But now every country, every government of the state in this region try to do best to realize the alleviation of the poverty. I remember that just 1 week ago, Laos became a developed country, without lowest income country by the, I think, okay.
Now Laos, the least developed country status.
Yeah. Now is a developing country.
Yes.
This is my, okay. And this is a good beginning. And I think with the China-Laos railway, especially with strength of the cooperation between two countries, there are new future for the development of Laos. This is my idea.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Dr. Saranyu next.
Well, thank you. I'd like to just make a very quick comment to go along with the result of Dr. Gaola's simulation a while ago. Now, we also have faced with reluctance on signing or agreeing on the CBTA, ASEAN CBTA. It's the roadway agreement, cross-border transport facilitation agreement that Laos itself would be quite reluctant to go full stream on this, because they have a concern to be only a transit country. If the cargo comes from China, it goes through Laos and it would go directly to Thailand. Laos would not benefit much. However, for passengers, like Dr. Gaola said, there are some good profits good benefits to Laos, because Laos itself has got some good tourist attraction sites and so on. So there's a challenge to Laos to prevent this kind of things to happen and to gain most out of this railway projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn the attention now to the people on the ground. I think so far we've talked in terms of the financial condition of the government and the kind of benefits that exporters, importers might get, but we haven't really quite touched on what's going to happen to the people on the ground, what they're going to see, the kind of changes they're going to expect along the way as after this railway launches tomorrow. Would anyone like to tackle that question? Maybe Ms. Panita? Yeah.
Since it's a question for people on the ground, I'm really interested to say something. So I think as we already see, the railway is now stimulating hope and expectation, but at the same time, it's also stimulating the fear for the public as well. If we following this during the construction time until today, it's about to open. On the one hand, Chinese and Lao government might point out that the railway is the investment as a source of the jobs for people, right? Maybe for young people, well-educated, fluent in Chinese, maybe they have more opportunity to be employed in railway company, or maybe when the tourist booming, it's gonna be a lot of Chinese company open, maybe they will got a job from that. But on the other hand, if you look at following the report that have been reported about how local people feel fear of the land grabbing or higher rent that will, because of their more competition between the new Chinese entrepreneur in the town. And it seems that the landowner in the town, they might prefer the Chinese tenants because they could get higher rent and long-term contracts in comparison with the Lao tenants. So we can see Chinese entrepreneurs, they're very, very have high capacity in doing business across the border. And it seems that the question it seems like predict to the future, but please allow me to step back a little bit during the construction time, how the railway has already changed Laos people and how they experience it a little bit, just 2 or 3 years. During the construction time, we have heard a lot about the displacement. 1,000 of communities have to move because of it in the railway construction plan. We have heard about they haven't got a compensation for the land, or the land that have give to them is a very poor quality in the soil and they cannot do the farm anymore, something like this. So this kind of the issue that happened on the ground. And another point that I want to make here, it's not only Lao people that experience. There a lot of Chinese community have already settled down in Laos already in many towns. Let me refer to one ethnographic work, a very fantastic work about how Chinese labor who have come to work in Laos have been exploited by subcontract company. Wan Jing Kelly Chen, this is a very fantastic job. She has this illusion about the problem on the ground when the Chinese worker, they come to work in, they have put in the middle of nowhere because the construction site is very far from the city, something like that. So many of them have been wait for 2 or 3 months to get salaries, or many of them have not getting paid at all, and because of the subcontract company have a financial issue because of the state railway company didn't pay them on time. So the surviving strategy is just to exploit the Chinese worker who actually put their hand on the track and working it. Many of them going back home without being paid. So this kind of tragedy, and I would say it's not a pleasant experience at all for people that experiencing. This is another, it's just another story that happened on the ground as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very important story that you just shared. Dr. Pon, you raised your hand. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, Two things, or I guess to look at both ends of it. Mr. Kila's remarks about passenger fares. The average rural, not average, the poorest rural communities in Laos, if they're lucky, make somewhere around $100 to $150 a month. So the average fare to get from Vientiane to the northern border is, over 10% of somebody's monthly income. Somewhere between $10 and $15, just to put that into perspective. And I think, to add on to what Ms. Sayerot said, even before the Belt and Road Initiative and before the railways, there was already Unioni's economic migration, both informal and state-sponsored, provincial government-sponsored in the Go Out strategy, all through the 2000s and early 2010s into Laos. So, the language around land grabbing is a real phenomenon around plantations, the ecological impacts of that, rubber, watermelon, timber, these extractive industries that again reflect, what Ms. Sayerot was saying, this asymmetry that really shouldn't be glossed over, around connectivity language, that there is a highly, there is an organized community of people in Yunnan with state support, business associations and other people who are looking for economic opportunity. There is extra capacity and they are looking for opportunities that are asymmetric to, without sort of rural protections. I guess my final point is, the future remains in this paradox that the Lao government and its agencies have to flex and stand for certain forms of policy autonomy in regulating land use, for example, in regulating worker conditions in SCZs and other industries at a time in which its indebtedness and its debt exposure politically makes it very vulnerable to exercise that kind of autonomy. So it's a delicate diplomatic place to be, but if it's concerned really about both regime maintenance and the social and environmental welfare of Laos citizens, it's in a rock and hard place that requires this kind of serious regulation. Otherwise, it's it'll be a sort of series of just special economic zones that bypass and marginalize and continue to impoverish rural areas around this. I want to hand it over, to my other participants, but the other thing I want to say around connectivity, some people will say, look, the Asian Development Bank in Japan and the World Bank also tried to do connectivity. These are just corridors that existed as plans before the Chinese moved in. And I would say that historically, it matters whether or not the connectivity is about corridors that create job transitions and transformation along the corridor, or whether it's about exporting export capacity. And I would say that, Thailand has benefited from, Japanese supply chain integration. And I'm skeptical as whether or not Laos is going to be integrated into any kind of, value added global production network through these corridors. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. I mean, that was a very important point about the asymmetric relationship. Mr. Kula, I saw your raised hand there, but before that, let me turn to Professor Yang.
Okay. I have some words to say. I think that we must not only focus on the economy. I think that with the construction of the China-Laos Railway, there are much more facility for the exchange of people to people, because this is very important. And with the facility of the travel, with the facility of the travel, and I'm sure there are much more tourists, Chinese tourists will go to Laos. For example, since last 10 days or 1 week, many the friends send a message by the WeChat, by etc. How I can take the train to Laos and after to Bangkok, come to see me, etc. Certainly, recently there are still the problem of the pandemic. It's difficult to travel, especially return to China. Much more the very severe the measure for the pandemic. But in the future, I'm sure there are many the tourists will come to visit Laos, and Laos also began much more famous than before in the heart of the Chinese people. And the second, I think this is also useful to elevate the importance of Laos in Southeast Asia, especially in the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. Because with this railway, we can find, certainly there are also another route like the Bangkok, Kunming route, etc. But with connection and there are more facility to travel also for the people of the Laos and other countries of the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. And they have also the attention to know more about China, especially about the south, south north province like Yunnan, Guangxi, etc. And on the basis of the mode exchange between the people, the ordinary people, and we have more the mutual understanding, more the knowledge, know better each other. And in this case, we can have a basis more solid for the future cooperation and the development of the relation between two countries. I just want to add some words.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kiolo?
Yes, I just happen to agree with most points that Dr. Pon has raised. So I just want to explain, shortly explain, about the passenger train that I said. When I said passenger train, I didn't mean that Lao people would ride it. The passenger train, it means that it would bring more. It would bring more foreign tourists to Laos. Now I think about 2 million Thai, arrive at Laos. Most of them, they don't go further to the north. Only a few portions of them. So in the model, it means most of the time it means foreign tourists. So and I do have concern, just to add some more. For cargo train, because the space is limited, I have concern that, the Lao producer, given the value added or the products that they produce, that they would be able to bid for the space on the cargo train. And the same is true for people. Because with, different of income level, you begin to see, package tour are being advertised in Thailand. Even before, this train start operating. So if, with limited number of seats, what would happen? Maybe it could be the same with the cargo train. So it is maybe more foreigners would be on it. But if we look at the tourism industry, I think that is still fine. Because, if more foreign tourists come, that would bring more money to the economy. And that still mean better for the Lao as a whole. But if you look at to the micro level, yes, there would be a problem that Dr. Pon said or Ms. Panida said. At micro level, there are problems. Many of them to be concerned of. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like there's a pent-up demand to travel on this train from Thailand as well as China. But of course, we've got to try to guess when the borders will be open for such travel. Dr. Pon, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so to follow up on both Dr. Yang and Mr. Gillo's point, right? So if we have a housing market that is, again, going to discriminate against, let's say, rural to urban migrants in Laos as it starts to, let's say, develop tourism areas. So a housing market, a passenger train that is beyond most people's monthly income, and cargo space that again doesn't actually facilitate domestic agricultural sector. It again raises these questions of development for whom, the railroad is for whom. And one of the nice things about Laos that I think anybody who's traveled to the mainland Mekong region would who's been to Thailand or other, I guess I say this as a Thai citizen, vis-a-vis other Mekong states, the impact, it's nice to kind of focus on these curated tourist areas. But again, I think if we end up creating marginalized areas that bypass completely and displace a vast majority of the underserved, you risk creating, we call it just uneven distributional impacts. You risk creating slums, essentially, right? These areas of, Laos doesn't have, it has urban areas, but it doesn't have significant, it has underserved agricultural areas. But we're talking in the future of, real changes that would look like what we call slums anywhere else in the world. That come about through, very polarizing processes of inequality. So it's something to be concerned about. And, if in terms of large-scale foreign tourism as well as migration into and out of Laos, would we call this settler colonialism if it was anywhere else? And why are we sort of polite about it when it comes to the Laos situation, and especially when Lao taxpayers for many, many, many generations to come will be paying for this.
Thank you. That's a great time to bring up my next question about, you brought up the word colonialism, right? Some feel that this railway will essentially make Laos beholden to China and make Laos a client state of China. And the point that you made about how it will create an imbalance between urban, rural, between different classes of workers. That's quite an important point, because we've got to ask ourselves what kind of society that might create in Laos. Would any panelists like to tackle that point? What do you think about these fears that we are seeing the beginning of Laos becoming a client state of China? No, nobody's tackling that question.
Okay.
Maybe I say something. I cannot say that I'm a Chinese expert, but I have been following the issue. I know there's a lot of fear on the ground, like China and Laos and Southeast Asia and etc. So we could see in general, before the railway start, 2016, we have seen a lot of political and financial setback, so that delayed the original plan. But at the end, they have overcome it. And from my point of view, I think just for ordinary people, this is kind of how the Chinese government success in delivering the promise of modernity to the Lao people, or maybe it can also show to the other Southeast Asia country, because this is such to seeing railway running over the river through the mountain, maybe it's kind of an outdoor showcase of Chinese technology, Chinese standards, something like that. And we already know that in Laos there's a huge of Chinese investment throughout the country. in every sector, real estate, agriculture, tourist sector, something like that. And there's also Chinese company can be found throughout Southeast Asia. So we can see it's kind of exporting labor, capital, and maybe input material far beyond their boundaries. Of course, it's going to be a huge opportunities for new coming, or even we already said, many panelists already mentioned there's many spatial economic zones on along the track. So this will be a huge opportunities. And at the same time, we can see that the railway will ensure the capital and the labor will flow between the country. But however, as we know that it seems to be that more and more Chinese entrepreneurs, maybe big company, or maybe, and also a lot of small entrepreneurs will following. So this kind of this will bring many layers of actors will interact with each other, and we never know that. I mean, well, from my own research, it seems that, for example, for the plantation agricultural sector, the farmers, smaller farmers, they cannot really like participate in the exporting to China, because first, for the let me give an example for the banana plantation. To export to China, you have to have to reach a certain amount of volume and stable volume to export to China. The second, we have to reach the Chinese standard to export to China. And the third, you have to have a business network in China. So my point here is, if there's a many layer of actors here, and there's an opportunity, but that's not guarantee that everybody got equal opportunities.
Great, thank you very
Not
much.
really answer, but just want to contribute something.
Yes.
Can I say something? I mean, about Ms. Tan's question. You know, I think the word client state is a bit, I mean, inappropriate, because you know, Laos is a landlocked country, and it's also a small country surrounding by powerful countries, most of them much more powerful than Laos. So it doesn't have the choice, I mean, to go against, I mean, to confront these countries. It doesn't have that choice to begin with. And if we look at, I mean, the Thai influence on Laos now, you know, I think during the 1990s or something, the then Prime Minister Chachai, maybe, you know, he had a policy turning Indo-Chinese from battlefield to market, and along that, you know, there was also policy to expand the Bath economic area, I mean, to neighboring countries. I don't know if that is official or not, but, you know, that campaign was most successful in Laos, then Cambodia, then Myanmar, because now, you know, people in Laos are using baht. You see, even the court decision, the amount of money that they write in court decision, sometimes it's in baht, in Thai baht. And if you see the important documents of the government or of the party, you know, the exchange rate to Thai baht, you know, it is treated equally the same as US dollar. It is the target of the government to control. But, you know, I think that is a rational a choice economically, because that is your only way out, you know. If something happened to Thailand, like in 1997, you know, the economy of Laos almost collapsed. I think it was a rational choice to do that. And what we are seeing now, I think, I don't think Laos is going to, I mean, to run away from Thailand. This interaction dependence, I mean, with Thailand would continue, but we are seeing some change now, some diversifications. I think a similar thing would happen between Laos and China. when you look at the price, table of the high-speed train, I think you would see yuan there. Or, people are starting to learn, or more people also are starting to learn Chinese. So the same way that you see many people in Laos speaking Thai, maybe there would be more people, especially those who are ethnically close to Chinese, when it is easier for them to learn Chinese, people in northern Laos. I think they would start to speak Chinese, or there could be more, people using yuan in Laos. And so to say that is amount to becoming a client state of China, I think is quite inaccurate. I say this as a closer economic relationship with China. Of course, I'm not saying that there would be no problems. Relationship with Thailand also has problems. Problems need to be tackled, but then we are seeing this shift. In the future, there would be another shift. I expect, if there is a highway to Vietnam or a train to Vietnam, the same thing would happen. Even now, along the border, you see this Vietnam influence. So. A small landlocked country working, closely with neighboring countries is not the same as being a client state. That is just my, how much is that, 1 penny opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That certainly puts things into perspective. I believe, Frank, you've got a question.
Hi, good evening. This is Frank Fu from Guangming Daily, China, member of FCCT. I have a question to the Vice President of NEDA. You mentioned about the connection between the Thai railway, the current Thai railway to the China-Laos railway. Could you try to elaborate more about the current status about the connection? For example, tomorrow with the grand opening of the railway, if I have a cargo, if I have something to deliver through the train to Lang Khai, how it will be brought to link with the China-Laos railway, and how Thai are going to prepare themselves to make use of the China-Laos railway, and could it be seamless, or in what sense? So what are the preparations from the Thai side? Thank you.
So certainly, if possible, could you bring up that next to last slide that I presented, please? But if it takes time, I would like to just say that now it is not that possible to go through, from Thailand, transited Laos, and go straight to China, because the size, the track sizes are quite different. However, I don't know what made this happen, because it happened quite so long ago, so long before my time at NEDA. But for example, the phase one was completed in 2008. And phase two, still 1 meter gauge track, is to be completed next year. So for a cargo or a passenger to go from Thailand to China, or from China to Thailand, passing through Laos, it would have to disembark and would have to go on again, on and off. So it's quite inconvenient. I'm not sure how they would try to fix this, but I think that there will be, they are talking about this. I'm not sure how far we got on this issue. I'm sorry, I'm not, if I'm not answering your question to the degree you expected. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got another question.
My name's Paul Williams. I'm a transport consultant. I've been working in Southeast Asia and China for the last 40 years. I'm currently working for the Asian Development Bank on a project related to connectivity of railways in the Greater Mekong area. So I know a bit about the background to all this. And what I'm going to say is nothing to do with the Asian Development Bank, it's my personal views. First of all, the railway from Kunming to Vientiane is a beautiful piece of railway engineering. It's wonderful. And I love Vientiane, but in the context of Southeast Asia and China, Vientiane isn't really a city, it's just a town. It's a small place, right? So on its own, this railway that's opening tomorrow is on its own, it's a dead duck. It only makes sense if it's extended to Bangkok and on to Singapore. So my question really for the NEDA gentleman is, what is Thailand doing about speeding that up? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saranyu. Dr. Saranyu, I think the question was, what is Thailand doing to speed up connections?
We will, yes, again, the missing link is our work, our responsibility. When Lao government, Lao Railway Department under Ministry of Transport requested, officially requested that to us. But before that, they would have to come up with an agreement between Lao government and itself to go along with the national policy on whatever to be built. I am not that far to be able to talk about that, but in case of need, NEDA could provide such support in terms of a concessional loan. And possibly I didn't give a presentation, but it's also possible to work together with other other development agency, development partner like JICA or maybe ADB to work on this project. But I am sorry, I don't have much more than this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please.
I could just add, I'm surprised that a photographer, particularly one that works for a multilateral institution, would patronize the capital city of a country in such manner. I mean, would you call Sheffield or Liverpool or any of these English cities towns? Anyway, so I just, regardless, you know, Vientiane is, it's a capital city. It has its own rhythm, it has its own architecture, it has its own history. So, and now it also has not one, but 3 train stations. So there we go.
Good point there. I like Vientiane too. Don't dismiss it.
Can I add something? I mean,
yes,
about this. You know, I have no right. I mean, to say anything about this, but you know, I understand why it takes time for Thailand to design, because you know, if you have options, it takes time. It becomes difficult for you to choose from. If you are a poor man, you know, without option, you only have one option to choose from. You have to choose it. If you want the high-speed railway, there's only one option. I mean, Laos, I had to go with it anyway. But Thailand, you know, Thailand is has many options. Not just China. You have Japan. You have, I mean, Western countries. You also have your own money. So I do understand that Thailand doesn't want to go with terms and conditions that is unfavorable to, to Thailand's. So to me, you know, I completely understand why it takes time for Thailand, to go ahead with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, just would like to add quickly. that my organization NADA's responsibility is anywhere out of Thailand. So anything within the sovereignty of Thailand, we have other organizations, other departments to take care of. So many, and I am not criticizing on any of their works, but I am only monitoring on what to be connected and what to be what further we can do to our neighboring countries to connect this to their systems. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a technical question. In the announcement, there was a talk about high speed, and the picture attached showed a Chinese high-speed train going 300 kilometers per hour. So what speed we are talking here about? Is it about 300 kilometers per hour or 160, including freight transport or not? And how will this affect the price, affordable or most probably not affordable to Lao people? Thank you.
That was a rather technical question. I'm not sure our panelists would like to tackle that, but I can answer. I mean, the maximum speed that the train goes will be 160 kilometers per hour, which is why some call it a medium speed and not high speed train.
Not high speed.
Yeah, well, everything is relative these days.
No, high speed was done 150 years ago in Germany already, okay? That was standard speed already, okay?
True, true. Well, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, so I'd like to ask the panelists one question to round up the evening. This project we're talking about took 5 years to construct. To you, what was the most surprising thing about the entire project? Just some time ago, I was talking to this scholar who said, well, he was surprised it got built in the first place. What about you? What surprised you? Anybody? Professor Young?
Because I can just give you some my personal impression. Most impressionant for me, 最惊奇的事情, yeah. I think that just I said around 20 years ago, I traveled by the jeep along the itinerary. I think it's the same than the China-Laos railway. But in this period, we are overcome the mountains, very dangerous, very difficult. And today, there are railway with more than 60% of the tunnel and the bridge. I think this speed is so repeatedly. And I think this is a miracle for the construction of railway in this region, because, from the border between China and Laos and to the Vientiane, there are many the mountain, also a side of the Mekong River. I think the construction is very difficult. With only 5 years of construction, now everything okay, and tomorrow they are the official opening ceremony. I think this is very impressionant for me. And the second, because when I travel along this itinerary, I find that the landscape is so beautiful, and I think maybe in the future, if I have opportunity, I will take the train from the Vientiane to Kunming, or from Kunming to Vientiane. And I hope that everybody, have also the interests to travel like this. This is my impression.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to go next? Was there anything surprising at all about this whole process? No, it was all. Yes.
To me, I was surprised that it was finished in time. I think that there is a similar project between China and Vietnam. The subway in Hanoi, you know, it took longer, much longer than it was supposed to finish. But this one, you know, it much larger project, but it was finished in time. So I think that the level of commitment was quite high. And this is related, I think, to what maybe Ms. Panida or Dr. Pon also said, you know, one of the reasons that not so many Lao workers could participate in the project because the government wanted it to finish. I mean, they prioritize the time schedule over, I mean, having more Laotian workers working at the construction sites. Because, you know, it takes time for you to train unexperienced people to work with this kind of project. Almost all of them, I think, were done by the Chinese. And that was one of the reasons that it finished, I mean, on time. I understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any concluding thoughts? Yes, Dr. Pon? No, you're waving. Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much. Those are all the questions we can take tonight. I'm sure it will take months and maybe years before the full impact of this railway is felt on the ground. And in the meantime, from what you've heard today, it's going to take Laos quite a bit of time to, you know, fully exploit the opportunities offered by this railway. We hope you've enjoyed the panel discussion tonight. If you like the work we do at the FCCT and would like to support us by making a donation, please, you can do so through the QR code on our website. Please join me in thanking the panelists for sharing their expertise with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. It's okay?